Alabama, and everybody will have the right to vote. With just 600 of them, Governor George Wallace picked up the phone and told state troopers, stop the march by any means necessary. They told the marchers that included now Congressman John Lewis, stop where you are or violence will break out. But they began to sing to themselves, before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. And they kept marching. They kept marching even in the face of barking dogs and relentless fire hoses and billy sticks. They kept marching. And that day, ladies and gentlemen, was in fact put in history as Bloody Sunday. That all they were trying to do was try to make a difference and secure the right to vote. One of the deacons who was able to escape unscathed got into his Chevy. He got into his Chevy and he drove to Montgomery, got to the back door of a church and met Dr. King as soon as he had just finished giving the benediction and said, come quickly, we've got trouble in Selma. Without any hesitation, without any delay, Dr. King got in his car. He got in his car even in the face of bloodstains, even with the howling of crying mothers, even at the face of children whose dreams had been dashed. There was a scathing dichotomy between that leadership and this leadership. Because when Dr. King heard about the trouble, he did not send an assistant. He didn't release a press release. But he said in the middle of the storm, in the middle of the crisis, that's where real leadership stands up. And ladies and gentlemen, 2 days later, he marched again, but not with 600, with 2,500. And as the numbers began to swell, he said, I need to make sure that we have equal protection under the law. He went to the 6th Circuit Court in Alabama and stood in front of Judge Thomas J. Woodrow and said, is it legal for us to march? And the rendering came back that yes, you can march because march is mobility. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had enough marches that do not have mobility. If it's not taking us anywhere, you might as well sit down. If we're gonna march, there ought to be a goal, it ought to be an aim, and there ought to be a target. And so a few days later, they went from 600 to 2,500 to 30,000. And this time, with that 30,000, they in fact began to declare with that kind of conviction, we are not marching for anything material. We're not marching so that we can get red-bottom shoes and Louis bags. We're not marching so we can get a BMW. We're not marching so that we can live a bourgeois, middle-class black lifestyle. We're marching so that our children would have access to vote. And ladies and gentlemen, it changed the landscape of civil rights. Because it was, in fact, the dawn of television, and people in the North were seeing for the very first time the vicious rage of what racism looked like. To see mothers being beaten, children running for dear life, and yet they held to the plow. And it was because of that march that the Voting Rights Act was passed. And if you fast forward 49 years later, now the Voting Rights Act is now in jeopardy, particularly Article number 5. That suggests that you cannot change the law unless you check with any judicial authority. Ladies and gentlemen, they're trying to change the law so that Africans and Latinos and Asians will in fact be disenfranchised. So that you'll now have to show photo ID in order to vote. You're asking yourself, why is this an issue? You'll notice when they elected Ronald Reagan, you didn't need ID. When they elected George Bush, you didn't need ID. But as soon as you put a black man in the White House, the laws begin to change and the standard is now different. And this generation is so lost and so disconnected that we don't even understand what is at stake and what is on the line. That there was a generation that understood we've got to get over the bridge. If we don't get over the bridge, we're going to lose everything. But here is a generation that didn't know Martin Luther King Jr., did not march, have no idea what Selma or Montgomery looks like. And so the question of this new generation is, what does the bridge have to do with me? I want to answer that for you. If Selma doesn't mean anything to you, if the Edmund Pettus Bridge doesn't mean anything to you, go back to September 8th, 2013. And September 8th, 2013, Governor Christie shut down the bridge. He shut down the bridge because people wouldn't agree with him. There were 3 lanes and he shut it down to 1 because there were too many people passing. San Antonio, I hope you'll wake up. They're shutting down the lanes because too many are graduating. They don't want to see you get to places like Phillips College and Paul Quinn College and Texas A&M. They would rather you stand on the street corner and look like Lil Wayne and Rick Ross. They don't understand out of your genes is the excellence of the brilliance of people that came up with engineering and science. But we topped the track down because we're not crossing the bridge. What are we crossing over into, ladies and gentlemen? Where we're doing the electric slide backwards. We're going further away from where it is that we've come from. We now know all of the latest dances but can't pass our classes. You twerking but can't read a book. You got gold teeth but nickel-plated brains. You got tattoos on your chest but you got nothing in your heart. When are you gonna cross over the bridge? They singled it down to just 1 lane. So now we have privatized prisons that are being exchanged on the New York Stock Exchange. Invested $20 million, Michael Jordan did, into private prisons. Yet you fighting each other over Air Force Ones. Send them Air Force Ones back to Chicago and put on some real shoes so that you can go get a job and make a difference and make something of yourself. They cross the lanes from 3 to just 1. I don't want you to ever get to the place where you become satisfied from getting halfway there, when the intention was for us to get all the way over the bridge. A 91-year-old lady by the name of Geneva died because Governor Christie shut down the bridge. How many more of our seniors will have to die in shame and embarrassment when they look at our generation and say, is this what we march for? Did we march for you to fight each other? Did we march for you to shoot each other like dogs in the street? You can't get mad about Trayvon Martin and you don't speak about killing in San Antonio. There's gotta be a consistency of our conviction. How much longer will our seniors have to in fact clutch their purses because they're not safe in their own neighborhood? How much longer will we live with the inequity where we get mad because somebody else calls us nigger, but we call each other the same thing every day? How much longer will we go backwards, realizing there's got to be more to your life than what you can buy if there's nothing that you saved? There ought to be something that we do in collective economics, that San Antonio moves to another place where we are business owners, that we are leaders, that we are in fact principals and educators. There's got to be more to your life than being a baby mama. Don't you have a dream? Ain't no sugar daddy. You done dried up. Find a job for yourself. But the lanes have dried up and nobody is getting over the bridge. We've come today not to reflect on the dream, but to make new dreams, to make new visions, and to make new assignments. You've got to go back to the understanding of the old Negro spiritual that suggested, if I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or with a song, then my living will not be in vain. Please know the system doesn't want to see you make it, but you're greater than any system. If the Middle Passage didn't kill you, you're greater than the system. If Jim Crow didn't kill you, you are greater than the system. If Ronald Reagan and Bush didn't kill you, you are greater than the system. And you're saying, Pastor Bryant, how do you know? I'm telling you, as somebody, ladies and gentlemen, who the system counted out, who the system didn't believe would still be here. I failed the 11th grade. Failed the 11th grade, got kicked out of high school. And my high school guidance counselor told my parents I would never be college material. But I had a praying mother that understood, hallelujah, that God knew me while I was still in my mother's womb. And after I got kicked out of high school, I went and got a GED. And after my GED, I went to Morehouse and got a bachelor's degree. And when I left Morehouse, I went to Duke University and got a master's degree. And when I left Duke University, I went to Oxford doctorate degree. And the same counselor that said I wasn't going to be anything is an usher at my church, because God can change the system. If there is no bridge, you got to make up in your mind, I'll make one. What will be the legacy that we leave for the children who come behind us? What will be our standard? Why will they in fact be able to fight through it? Just a few years ago, ladies and gentlemen, there was an American Airlines plane leaving out of the Bahamas. And leaving out of the Bahamas, they had just got on the runway. And just getting on the runway, the stewardess got on the intercom and called the pilot and said, pull the plane over. She said, why? He said, why are we pulling the plane over? She said, pull the plane over because there's a snake on this plane. He said, no, it's going to be all right. Do me a favor. I only need you to do 3 things. Stay where you are. Keep talking to me. The situation is under control. Said, pilot, you must be confused. This ain't no garden snake. This is a real cobra snake in the back of this plane. And the pilot, ladies and gentlemen, started going down the runway. She said to him, you got to pull this plane over. He said, don't worry about it. Stay where you are. Keep talking to me. The situation is under control. She said, if the passengers see this snake, they're going to turn all the way up and lose their mind. Said, don't worry about it. Stay where you are. Keep talking to me. The situation is under control. With jet propulsion and wind velocity, he pulled the plane up to 10,000 feet in the air, and the snake started slithering down the aisle. All of the passengers started screaming and jumping in his chair, and she called him to the pilot and said, what should I do now? He said, stay where you are. Keep talking to me. The situation is under control. He pulled the plane up now to 30,000 feet in the air, and when he pulled it to 30,000 feet in the air, the snake stopped moving. Said, what do I do now? He said, kick it. Said, what do you mean kick it? If I kick it, it's gonna bite me. The pilot said, trust me on this, kick it. She kicked the snake, ladies and gentlemen, and the snake didn't move. Why? Because it died. What the stewardess did not know is that before he was a pilot, he was a veterinarian. And he knew that snakes can't handle high altitude. I came to San Antonio just to tell somebody that God told me to tell you, stay where you are. Keep talking to me. The situation is under control.